I never expected the night to end with that crushing silence. Rose's words hanging over me like a storm cloud. Jane's never quite lived up to the family name, has she? The words echoed in my ears, sharp as broken glass. I was 37, a healthcare administrator with 12 years under my belt, managing operations quietly but effectively. Yet at that moment, I felt like I was nothing more than a shadow in my own family. My name is Jane Swanson. I'm the one who keeps the wheels turning, both at work and at home, paying bills quietly, covering household expenses without a word, and making sacrifices I never broadcast. The house we live in, my inheritance from Mom, remains my secret, a silent power I've never dared to use. I've been the invisible backbone, the responsible one, the steady hand no one thanks. Rose, my stepmother, came into my life when I was 20. Since then, she's built walls around her children and pushed me to the sidelines. Last week at dinner, when I shared news of my promotion, she dismissed it as not that impressive, and no one defended me. The coldness isn't new, but it's growing. I want to believe it can change, but sometimes hope feels like a fragile thread about to snap. I can still see that Christmas so vividly, the one when I was 14, just a year before my mom died. I had my acceptance letter to the state university clutched tightly in my hands, heart pounding with pride and hope. I showed it to Rose, hoping for a smile, a word of encouragement. Instead, she took the letter, her smile tight and lifeless. "You're not moving away," she said flatly. I never saw that letter again. It disappeared like my chances of being seen as part of the family. Meanwhile, Mark, Rose's son, was showered with praise for even the smallest accomplishments. She made it clear I was the burden, the outsider. Dad never questioned her, and I told myself it was her way of protecting me, or just tough love. But those family vacations she organized, I was almost always left behind to babysit or care for the house, never part of the fun. That Christmas was my first real taste of invisibility, the moment I realized I was different, not quite belonging. For years, I've been the quiet provider, the one who takes on the heavy lifting no one acknowledges. I pay about $15,000 a year toward the mortgage and utilities, covering more than my fair share of household expenses without a complaint. I've turned down promotions that would have uprooted me, staying close to Dad when his health started to falter. My dream vacations? Canceled 3 times, replaced by emergency family bills or Rose's sudden demands. Daniel, my husband, watches this all quietly, sometimes asking why I keep giving without any recognition. I tell him it's love. That's what keeps me going. My sister Linda, caught in the middle between Rose's favoritism and her own loyalty to me, often seems distant, but listens quietly when I need to vent. Mark remains blissfully unaware of the debts I cover or the sacrifices I make, assuming everything comes easily to me. The house in my name, left by Mom, is my anchor, but it's a secret I guard closely. The power it represents is something I'm still trying to understand myself. Then there was Mark's graduation party, the night everything felt like it cracked. Rose, standing in front of the crowd, said with that icy smile, "Jane's never quite lived up to the family name. Has she?" The room went dead silent, eyes darting uncomfortably. I felt my chest tighten, a sinking weight deep inside. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I managed a quiet, "Everyone has their own path," and slipped out without another word. The laughter from Rose's children stung like salt in a wound, but I forced myself to believe she was just stressed, maybe trying to joke. Still, something inside me shifted. I refused to toast to Rose's perfect family that night. It was a tiny act, barely noticeable, but it felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. For the first time, I realized I might not be willing to stay silent forever. Yet, even as doubts crept in, I clung to hope that things might still get better. After all, family is supposed to hold you up, not tear you down. Rose noticed my subtle defiance immediately, like a predator sensing weakness in its prey. Almost overnight, the atmosphere shifted. At the next family gathering, I felt the cold stares before I even walked in the door. Whispers followed me. "Jane's so ungrateful. She's always stirring up trouble." It was as if Rose had rewritten the script, casting me as the villain in a play I didn't audition for. Even Linda, usually my quiet ally, seemed hesitant, her eyes avoiding mine as if I might infect her with my supposed drama. I overheard her say to a friend, "Jane's just too sensitive. Maybe we should give her some space." That stung worse than any insult. Daniel wasn't spared either. Mark's friends cornered him at a party, spewing half-truths and twisted stories about me causing family chaos. Daniel came home angry and confused, asking if I was really the storm everyone claimed I was. The doubt crept in. Was I truly too sensitive? Had I become the problem in a family just desperate for peace? Rose's gaslighting was relentless, a constant drip of poison seeping into every interaction. I tried to meet her gaze, to push back with facts and calm reasoning, but all I got were icy silences or dismissive looks. The family seemed to close ranks tightly around Rose, leaving me isolated and aching. Every day tested my backbone. Every breath felt heavier, but despite the ache, I refused to be broken. I was determined to hold on to the last shreds of my dignity. To confront the chaos, I requested a family meeting with Dad and Rose, hoping for clarity, maybe even peace. Sitting around the kitchen table, I spoke calmly, listing my financial contributions, the sacrifices I'd made, the emotional toll Rose's favoritism had taken. My voice was steady, but inside I felt vulnerable, exposed. Rose responded with tears, real or staged, I couldn't tell. She painted herself as the overwhelmed victim, drowning in my constant accusations. Dad looked torn, caught between us, but ultimately sided with Rose, his voice pleading for family harmony that seemed to only exist in his head. Linda's silence was loud enough. Her eyes filled with sympathy, but no words came to her lips. The meeting ended with Rose's cold warning. "Stop making mountains out of molehills, Jane." I left feeling smaller than ever, swallowed by the unfairness of it all. I had tried to speak honestly, to make space for my pain, but my voice was drowned by rose-colored tears and family politics. The peace I craved felt like a mirage, shimmering just out of reach. I grasped for hope, but found only exhaustion. Walking away, I could hear the faint laughter of Rose's children echoing in my mind, mocking, triumphant. Then came the hospital fundraiser, the place where I'd built my professional reputation through years of hard work and quiet dedication. Rose, ever the calculated tormentor, leaked to one of Dad's acquaintances that I was the selfish daughter who abandoned her family for career ambitions. The words spread fast like wildfire, igniting suspicion and doubt in the eyes of the hospital board. A major donor questioned my commitment, threatening to pull crucial funding from my department. I felt the sting of humiliation, not just personal, but professional, the kind that could unravel everything I'd worked so hard for. Daniel stood by me, trying to defend my character in front of the board, but Rose's shadow loomed too large, her influence undeniable. I caught her smirk from across the room, that cold gleam that said this was no accident, that this was carefully planned cruelty meant to break me. Later, in a quiet confrontation, I faced her. She leaned in close, voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "You should be grateful I'm protecting the family name," she sneered. The words hit me like a slap, brutal and unforgiving. It wasn't protection, it was punishment, a calculated hit to my pride and my future. The humiliation was searing, but beneath it all, a flicker of something fierce and unyielding sparked inside me. Determined to salvage whatever shred of peace remained, I reached out one last time. I offered to help Rose with the family budget, hoping to prove my commitment and willingness to work together. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I spoke plainly about my need for respect, fairness, and acknowledgement. I laid my feelings bare. No accusations, no anger, just a daughter asking to be seen. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd soften. But instead, she dismissed me coldly, refusing even to meet my eyes, ignoring my presence during family meals like I was already erased. That night, after Rose stormed out without a word, leaving the room thick with silence, I realized she had crossed a line. I had been vulnerable, offering an olive branch, and was met with rejection so complete, it felt like a final severing. In the quiet of the living room, I whispered to Daniel, "I did everything I could. The weight of finality settled over me like a heavy fog. I had reached the end of the road on this path, and the family I longed to belong to was slipping through my fingers. The fractures were growing too wide to bridge, and all that was left was the ache of what once might have been. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of everything I'd tried to hold together. Rose worked tirelessly behind the scenes, weaving her poisonous narrative into every corner of our lives. At family dinners, I noticed how the air thickened when I entered the room, whispers trailing behind me like shadows. "Jane's always so demanding," I overheard faintly from one of Rose's closest friends. The words stung because they were so far from the truth, but what hurt more was seeing those doubts reflected in Linda's hesitant eyes. She, my sister, who once had been a quiet refuge, now seemed wary, almost cautious. Our conversations grew sparse, her tone clipped, as if she was trying not to choose sides but slipping further away all the same. Mark, emboldened by Rose's approval, didn't even bother hiding his contempt. At a rare family gathering, he smirked across the table and muttered loud enough for me to hear, "Maybe if you weren't so weak, you'd have gotten what you wanted." His words cut deep, not because of their cruelty alone, but because they echoed the doubt that had been creeping into my mind. Was I really the problem? Had I been too sensitive, too demanding, too much? The self-doubt wrapped around me like a cold, unrelenting fog. Exhaustion seeped into my bones, not just physical, but the kind of soul-deep fatigue that makes you question your worth. Daniel was the one constant light in the growing darkness. His steady hands, quiet reassurances, and unwavering belief in me kept the cracks from becoming chasms. Yet even his support felt fragile against the tide of isolation pressing in. I found myself shrinking. I withdrew from calls, avoided family events, and wrapped myself in silence, preparing for the inevitable fight that simmered beneath the surface. The home I once thought of as a sanctuary felt more like a battlefield, where I was the lone soldier outnumbered and outmaneuvered. I clung to the little strength I had left, trying to steel my heart against the growing loneliness and the gnawing question, am I really the one who's broken? One evening, when the house was cloaked in the kind of stillness that only comes late at night, I stumbled upon the truth in the worst possible way. Rose had forged Dad's signature, transferring the deed of the house, my late mother's inheritance, straight into her name and Mark's. The documents were damningly clear, a silent erasure of my place, my security, my legacy. I held the papers trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, furious clarity that settled like ice in my veins. Dad was devastated when I told him, his hands shaking as he stared at the forgery, eyes wide with disbelief and helplessness. He had been blind to Rose's machinations, paralyzed by love and trust, unable to protect what was rightfully mine. Linda was there when I confronted Rose, her eyes wide and unsure, caught between loyalty and shock. I kept my voice steady, calm, cold even, as I said, "This ends now." The room, once thick with tension, seemed to crack open with the weight of that sentence. The hope I'd clung to, fragile and desperate, shattered into icy fragments. I wasn't the lost daughter anymore. I was someone betrayed beyond repair, someone who could no longer afford the luxury of hope or forgiveness. That night the veil was lifted, and I saw Rose's control in brutal relief, absolute and suffocating. If I was ever going to reclaim my power, I had to do it alone. Alone in my study, I sat surrounded by silence, the walls seeming to close in as memories flooded back with unbearable sharpness. Every sacrifice I'd made, every dismissal I'd endured, was etched deep in my mind like a painful tapestry. The grief of betrayal settled first, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it churned something raw and fierce, anger. I saw clearly the pattern Rose had woven, favoritism that was less about love and more about domination, humiliation used as a weapon, and now, outright theft. The tears came quietly, not in sobs but in bitter acknowledgement of what had been stolen from me. And then, as the grief shifted, a cold resolve took root. I whispered to the empty room, "Never again." Those two words felt like a lifeline, a promise I made to myself for the first time in years. This wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about awakening. The house, the inheritance I'd kept secret, was still within reach, tied up in legal nuances and my own financial contributions that no one else seemed to acknowledge. The pain was real, but so was my strength. For too long, I'd hidden that power, afraid to claim what was mine. Now, it was a quiet fury burning beneath my calm exterior, an unyielding force that said no more tears, no more silence. This was my moment of awakening, a fierce, unshakable clarity that would not be ignored. Late into the night, Daniel and I sat close, the soft hum of the city outside contrasting with the storm inside my head. I laid it all out. The betrayals, the losses, the final breaking point. "I'm done asking for their recognition," I said, voice low but firm. "It's time to protect what's mine and set boundaries, starting with silence. No more calls, no explanations." Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of concern, but also admiration. He reached out, squeezing my hand gently. "Whatever you need, I'm with you," he said quietly, caution edging his tone but unwavering support in every word. Together, we mapped out a careful plan to cut off communication with Rose and those who sided with her, letting the consequences of her actions unfold without my participation. I would quietly leverage my legal rights over the property and financial records, gathering evidence and lining up resources. This wasn't about confrontation or dramatic battles. It was a strategic withdrawal, a silent but powerful stand. I could feel a strange calm settling over me, a mental sharpening that made the path ahead clearer. I was no longer the invisible daughter, no longer the family's overlooked caretaker. I was ready to reclaim control, not with noise or fury, but with quiet strength and calculated resolve. I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread before me like fragments of a shattered life. Each bank statement, every utility bill, all the mortgage payments, I pored over them with relentless focus. The numbers told a story I hadn't fully grasped until now. Rose and Mark depended on the house's equity, and my silent financial contributions far more than anyone admitted. My quiet payments had kept the household afloat, while they claimed control and denied my place. The weight of that realization settled heavy on my shoulders. This wasn't just about money. It was the invisible thread holding them in place. The next step was consulting Clara, the attorney I'd trusted for years. When I laid out the forged deed and my documented payments, she didn't hesitate. "Jane, your claims hold. Despite the forgery, the law recognizes your ownership and your right to reclaim what's yours." Her calm certainty was a balm, but also a spark. We discussed the strategy. Gather every email, text, bank transfer, anything that proved my contributions and Rose's manipulations. I began compiling a digital dossier, each message a small brick in the foundation of my case. The more I gathered, the clearer it became. This family leaned on me emotionally and financially, even as they cast me aside. As I mapped out these dependencies, my mind sharpened. The mortgage payments, utilities, Dad's medical insurance, these were the pressure points. If I withdrew just enough support strategically, I could make them feel the strain without burning bridges too quickly. The house wasn't just a building, it was leverage, a weapon disguised as a home. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction, the kind that comes when you finally see the rules of a game you didn't know you were playing. For the first time in years, I was not just the caretaker, but the one holding the cards. Sitting back, I let the silence envelop me. The house hummed quietly around me, the faint ticking of the clock, the distant sound of traffic like a lullaby of normalcy. Yet beneath this calm veneer, a storm was brewing, and I was at its eye. I whispered to myself, "This is the beginning." Whatever came next, I would be ready, armed not only with facts and proof, but with a fierce clarity that had been forged in pain and betrayal. The quiet power in my hands was intoxicating. I wasn't invisible anymore. I moved through my apartment like a shadow, carrying out each task with deliberate precision. Passwords changed, financial accounts locked down tighter than a fortress. I updated my contact information with the bank and the utility companies, preparing legal notices that remained tucked away in folders on my laptop, ready to be unleashed when the time came. Every action was cloaked in normalcy, a practiced smile worn like armor during family gatherings that felt more like hostile territory. They saw the Jane they expected, polite, composed, agreeable, never suspecting the silent revolution unfolding beneath that calm surface. At the last dinner, I caught Rose's sharp eyes watching me, searching for signs of weakness, of hesitation, but I was a coiled spring, still and composed, the tension inside me invisible to all but myself. I made small talk, laughed lightly at harmless jokes, and nodded along to conversations that excluded me. Every interaction was a mask, a performance that drained my spirit but preserved my dignity. I craved the silence that followed the guest's departure, the solitude where I could breathe without pretending. At night, when the house finally settled, I'd sit in my study, reviewing my digital files, cross-referencing emails and payments, and rehearsing the legal language Clara had advised me on. My thoughts raced, but my voice remained steady in their presence. I could feel the weight of what was coming, but embraced it with a strange calm, savoring this moment of quiet control. Rose's inability to read me was infuriating, a sign that I was no longer the woman she could manipulate with whispered threats or icy glares. The calm before the storm had a certain clarity, a focus sharpened by years of suppression. I whispered to Daniel once, "They think I'm the same girl who bends under pressure." He nodded, gripping my hand gently. "They don't know what you're really capable of," he said softly. And in that quiet exchange, the promise of a new chapter settled between us. I was no longer the silent victim, no longer the overlooked daughter. The game was changing, though they had no idea just how much. Late one evening, as I sifted through old tax returns and financial disclosures, a document slipped from a folder like a hidden shard of glass. Rose's name tied to a massive, undisclosed debt of $250,000. My breath caught. How had I missed this? The papers revealed creditors and collateral liens tied to family assets none of us had ever been told about. It was no accident that she'd worked so hard to erase my claim on the house and silence my voice. This wasn't mere favoritism or jealousy. It was a desperate cover-up for a financial disaster she'd buried beneath layers of deceit. The implications hit me like a freight train. Rose's control was less about family loyalty and more about self-preservation. That debt explained her frantic grip on the house, her coldness towards me, and her ruthless sidelining of anyone who threatened to expose her. The image she cultivated, the protective stepmother, the pillar of the family, was a fragile facade built atop a house of cards, and I held the blueprint to bring it crashing down. My fingers trembled as I stared at the numbers, realizing the urgency this added to my plan. I felt a fierce surge of vindication mixed with a deep sadness. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about truth and justice for the family who deserved better than a life built on lies. I called Clara immediately, my voice low but steady as I explained the discovery. Her silence on the other end of the line was heavy with understanding. "Jane, this changes everything. We need to act fast." The moral weight of this truth galvanized me, adding a new fire beneath my resolve. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was dismantling a deception that had poisoned my entire family's foundation. That night, I lay awake. The documents spread across my lap like evidence in a courtroom. The house, the debts, the betrayal, they all twined together in a bitter knot. But finally, I saw the path forward with brutal clarity. I whispered to the darkness, "The truth will be the reckoning." My heart pounded, not with fear, but with purpose. This was my turning point, and I was ready to meet it head on. The first move was deliberate and silent. I stopped all financial contributions. No more mortgage payments, no more utilities, no insurance premiums for Dad's medical coverage. The house, once a place of quiet suffocation, became a battlefield of unpaid bills and mounting tension. Rose's phone calls went unanswered. Texts and social media messages were blocked without a word. Mark noticed immediately. The overdue notices began arriving, terse and unyielding. The household atmosphere shifted. Strained conversations, sharp glances, and the faint scent of panic. I felt a strange satisfaction, tempered by a calm detachment. I was no longer at their mercy. Daniel watched the transformation quietly, his eyes tracking the shift in me, a Jane who no longer reacted with hurt or anger, but moved with calculated resolve. "You're like a different person," he said softly one evening, his voice tinged with awe, stronger. I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. The power I'd long suppressed was finally surfacing, not as rage, but as a measured force that demanded recognition. Rose's carefully maintained facade began to crack, her control slipping through the fingers she'd clenched so tightly. At family gatherings, the atmosphere grew palpable. Rose's forced smiles faltered. Her usual icy confidence was replaced by something more fragile. Whispers circled like vultures. But I held my ground, a quiet pillar of strength amid the chaos. No explanations, no excuses, just an unyielding boundary drawn in the sand. The first ripple of consequences spread through the family. Subtle but unmistakable, they felt the absence of my support, a vacuum I created deliberately. And through it all, I remained composed, calm, a silent storm gathering force just beneath the surface. The room was alive with the usual hum of voices, laughter, and clinking glasses, a mask of celebration for Dad's birthday. I stepped forward, clutching the thick folder of documents, feeling every eye settle on me as the chatter dimmed into uneasy silence. My voice was steady, even as my pulse thudded like a drum in my ears. "There's something you all need to see," I said, sliding the papers across the table with deliberate calm. "These are the original deeds, notarized well before Rose ever tried to change anything. And this," I tapped a page showing a forged signature, "is the falsified transfer she executed without Dad's knowledge." My fingers trembled slightly, but my gaze held firm. Rose's face froze, the carefully constructed mask slipping as shock flickered in her eyes. "Jane, that's not true," she stammered, voice cracking with panic. "You're misunderstanding. These documents are fake." But the room had already shifted. Dad's hand shook as he reached for the papers, his eyes scanning the undeniable proof. Linda's expression turned from confusion to disbelief. The air hung heavy, thick with tension, and unspoken truths finally laid bare. I continued, voice clear. "There's more. A $250,000 debt, hidden from everyone but Rose, secured against family assets. This isn't just deception. It's dangerous." The silence pressed down on us all. Rose's lips parted, searching for a retort, but no words came. I met her gaze without flinching. "This ends here. No more lies, no more control. If you want any contact with me, there must be honesty and respect. Otherwise, consider this the boundary." The weight of those words rippled through the room. For the first time, I felt the power shift, a silent recognition in the eyes of those who had doubted me. Supportive nods flickered between family members, subtle but unmistakable. I wasn't invisible here, no longer sidelined or silenced. I was standing tall, the quiet storm finally breaking free. Rose's breath hitched, and for a moment, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, vulnerable beneath the brittle armor. Dad's eyes met mine, a mix of regret and something like newfound respect stirring beneath his grief. Linda stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jane, I didn't know." The room held its breath, suspended between the past's shadows and the uncertain light of truth. I exhaled softly. A calm settled deep inside me. The battle was far from over, but this moment, this revelation, was mine. I had taken the first step toward freedom. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Rose's carefully cultivated world began to crumble in ways I had only dared to imagine. Creditors appeared like vultures, demanding answers that she couldn't provide, her financial web unraveling under the weight of exposure. Rumors spread through the family and community, whispers turning into harsh truths as assets were frozen pending investigation. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Rose's number flashing over and over, desperate messages begging me to talk, to forgive, to forget. But I remained silent. I had drawn my line in the sand, and I wasn't stepping back. Desperation seeped into her voice when she finally left a voicemail. "Jane, please, just one more chance to explain. We can fix this. I'm your family." I deleted the message without a second thought. Each attempt at manipulation, Love-bombing texts, false apologies, promises to make things right, fell on deaf ears. My heart, once aching for connection, had hardened into a shield. Meanwhile, other family members, confused and hurt by Rose's unraveling, sought me out quietly, asking for clarity, for truths I was now willing to share but only on my terms. Mark, Rose's son, faced the harsh glare of social embarrassment as news of the scandal seeped beyond our family walls. His peers whispered, judgment and pity mingling in equal measure. I watched from afar, detached but aware that Rose's actions had fractured more than just our family's finances. They had shattered trust and respect in ways that no apology could mend. Rose's isolation grew daily, a stark contrast to the control she once wielded so ruthlessly. I stayed firm, my silence louder than any confrontation, a steady reminder that I was no longer a pawn in her game. Rose's tactics escalated in desperation. Threats of legal action arrived like poisoned arrows, laced with claims of victimhood and betrayal. She painted herself as the wronged wife and mother, reaching out to distant relatives to pressure me, weaving emotional blackmail about breaking up the family. But I was unmoved. My legal team stood ready, documents in hand, and Daniel's unwavering support was my fortress. The mask Rose wore cracked further each day, revealing a woman cornered and unraveling. Some family members, once loyal to her, approached me in quiet regret, their apologies tentative but sincere. I accepted them cautiously. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. The family's allegiance shifted subtly but unmistakably. Whispers of doubt replaced Rose's once unquestioned authority. Her confident posture gave way to defeat, her voice losing the sharp edge that had always unnerved me. I met her attempts to regain control with resolute silence, refusing to be drawn into her drama or manipulated by her pleas. The power I reclaimed was steady and unyielding, built on truth and fortified by boundaries I would no longer let her cross. In the quiet aftermath, I found a strange solace, not in victory over her, but in freedom from the chains she'd wrapped around my life for so long. 6 months later, I sit in a sunlit apartment thousands of miles from the tangled roots of my past. The legal battles behind me, the house's ownership fully restored. I breathe deeply in this space Daniel and I have made our own. The air smells of new beginnings, fresh paint, blooming plants on the balcony, and the soft hum of a city alive with possibility. My phone carries only the contacts I choose, the ones who respect the boundaries I set. Dad and Linda remain part of my life, but our interactions are measured, respectful, and carefully defined. There are no illusions, only the quiet understanding of what can and cannot be. Rose's name now echoes faintly in the background of my life, a cautionary tale of control and its consequences. She faces financial ruin and estrangement, her presence a distant shadow I no longer fear or resent. I carry no bitterness, only peace, the kind born from reclaiming my story and writing it on my own terms. Reflecting on this journey, from a daughter silenced and sidelined to a woman empowered and resolute, I realized that silence paired with decisive action was my true strength. I didn't need to shout or fight. I needed to stand firm and let the truth speak volumes. Freedom tastes like morning sunlight spilling into this quiet new life, unburdened by the past's heavy chains. I am no longer defined by others' expectations or the invisible roles assigned to me. The future stretches wide and open, a blank page waiting for the story I choose to write. And for once, I am content simply to be strong, seen, and finally free.